In 1794, Voltaire wrote the satirical, picaresque novel Candide. He managed to write this novel over the span of 3 days. That's pretty impressive, considering it took me 3 days to make this crappy video using Microsoft Paint and Movie Maker. Before we talk about Candide, it's important to give a little background on the life and times of its wonderful writer Voltaire. Voltaire was born in France in 1694, and he was alive during a hugely important time of Reformation known as the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a direct result of important discoveries like gravity and basic human rights, but it can basically be summed up as Europe's edgy teenager phase. What happened was a bunch of rich kids got together and started rebelling against the church, aka their overprotective parents. The church had always kept everybody in line by holding Jesus and his promise of everlasting life above their heads. Then this guy came along, and he was like, "That's wrong." And everybody was like, "Oh, okay." And then, left and right, you have people coming out of the woodwork to commit all sorts of blasphemy and sin. You have this guy named Diderot writing books about atheism. Then this other punk named Locke is going around and claiming that he has rights. Then there's these upstarts who are composing their own music that isn't about God. And then of course there's colonists who are literally running away from home to go to the New World. Now, the church likes some of these people going to the New World. They're like, yeah, that's cool. Then, as soon as the church turns its back on the colonists all start teaching experimental natural philosophy to the natives, well, the ones that aren't covered in smallpox, and growing and selling tobacco to make a quick buck. Now, Voltaire was particularly edgy. He went to prison for almost a year because he accused a regent of incestual relations with his daughter. Voltaire wasn't even his real name. He made it up because he didn't like his other name, which is something in French that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Now, edgy and angstiness aside, Candide is Voltaire's most well-known writing, mostly due to its excellent sense of humor. One of the sources of humor in Candide is the character Dr. Pangloss. Whether he is a real doctor is unknown, but his character is basically a parody of the beliefs of Gottfried Leibniz, which can basically be summed up with a simple oxymoron: hopeless optimism. Now, everybody called me an oxymoron at middle school. I think it was because all the girls thought I was both super cool and smoking hot at the same time. But they usually just shorten it down from oxymoron to moron, but I think I knew what they meant. Now, Pangloss is an overblown bag of hot air. His favorite sound is his own voice. This is apparent throughout the whole book. Well, at least while he's still alive. Pangloss's entire philosophy hinges around not doing anything, but waiting and assuming that everything will work out in the end. And it did, up until he was hanging from the gallows. In Chapter 5, Candide gets crushed by falling rocks. He asks for Pangloss's help, and rather than help him, Pangloss just launches into a lecture about the earthquake that caused the falling rocks. And Candide is just laying there, listening to it, still bleeding out. Pangloss is so blinded by his optimism that he does not see his own people dying in front of his eyes. Besides being a satire of Voltaire's opinion of the philosophes, Pangloss is also something more. Pangloss is the antithesis of the Enlightenment. He's not a real doctor, and he doesn't really study a real branch of philosophy. And he lived his life in the cushy care of a monarch. He's basically a goody-goody. And if there's one thing that edgy philosophes do not like, it's a goody-goody. So Voltaire kills him off. His death marks a serious turning point in the book, as naive Candide is left alone without the guidance of his equally naive teacher. Pangloss is a very much exaggerated character. Obviously, Voltaire does not hate all philosophes. He really created the character just to mess with them and to satirize them. But he's also drawing attention to what he considered fake philosophes. Ultimately, Voltaire had a message. Sitting around and hoping that things got better on their own really gets us nowhere fast. But I don't think there's any harm in trying it.